We're going to go now to our Glenna Milberg. She's near the scene. Glenna, are you still on the beach side?
We are, Nicole Calvin. We've kind of planted ourselves with a view of where we can see the recovery work when it happens, and also from the same vantage point. I'm going to step out of the way. The backside of this building, I was listening to Hatzel's report. This is where you start to feel really personal. There are apartments here. At one moment, people were in them sleeping at 1 o'clock this morning, and the next moment they were just ripped raw, exposed to the elements. There were people, we understand, who were in apartments feet away from what became exposed to the outside as that part of the building pancaked down, and you can see the personal effects, and it really starts to hit home. Rugs, and if I want you to look up on the very top floor, you see the white bunk beds and a desk chair. In our live report about an hour ago, we showed that, and it was just making an example of these people's belongings and furniture. And right after we got off the air, someone messaged me, that apartment belongs to someone named Linda March. I want you to look at her photograph. Linda March is an attorney who apparently just moved back here to Surfside from New York, who loved being here. She had COVID and recovered from COVID. She was just in a great place, an attorney moving back to Surfside to live. That is her penthouse number 4. This person who messaged me said he's been texting all day. The texts are going through and they remain unanswered. And the same person knows another person who lives a few floors under Linda, and was telling me that Linda recently had been complaining about the rumblings and the roof work that they were doing here. And this is going to be really interesting, because as we hear bits and pieces from family members and from residents who were evacuated or who were rescued, we hear little bits and pieces about what they've been going through with the work in the building, their complaints about certain things they heard and saw. We met a valet, a valet Parker, who 1 hour prior to the collapse saw rushing water through the building. We're trying to find out a little more about that. We've heard people claiming that they felt rumblings in the hours or so yesterday prior to the collapse. So all of these things are going to be little bits and pieces of evidence that come out. But right now, the focus here is on the human toll. And as you look at the back of this building, we have the vantage point where I can really show you, if you're just joining us, for anyone who just joined us, this building is identical to the partner building to the north, 3 buildings down, and that is the north building. There's a northeast-south. The collapse was on the south. So right now you're looking at the north building, and you see how it's kind of an L shape. And the entire line of the L that protrudes toward the east, which is toward the beach, which is what you're looking at, toward you, that is the part of the building that collapsed. An enormous part, about a third of the building, and apparently from who we have been speaking to and who are looking into this, it was a pancake kind of collapse. It wasn't a fall, it wasn't a tilt, it was a straight down pancake. That is catastrophic for anyone inside. Even those who could survive within air pockets and rubbles, a pancaked building, according to the rescue people here, probably does not have many of those. So that is sort of a look and a comparison how it happened. Now one part of a huge focus, while the human cost is going to still right now underway. Excuse me, I'm trying to multitask at the moment, but the human part of this is really what people are focusing on now. There are rescue dogs and rescue crews. The dogs, of course, go by scent, trained to find people in rubble. One of the most difficult things to hear is that the dogs' scent and their ability to smell is much keener as time goes on, because the human remains here longer have a stronger scent. As hard as that is to hear, as hard as that is to say, that is what these people here are facing. Dozens and dozens and dozens of crews are here, search and rescue, as well as on the other side of the building, the electrical crews, engineers. A lot of the power is out for buildings to the north, 3, 4, 5 buildings to the north. I don't know about the south, but the electricity went out. I'm not quite sure why that is, but they're working to repair that. And then there are just the pictures that are emerging, the people here on the beach showing us photographs of loved ones who they haven't heard from. So right now, what they see is devastating, Nicole, Calvin. What they hear is devastating, but perhaps the worst part is what they are not hearing, and that is their loved ones' voices.
And Glenna, if I can just put some names in front of you, and I certainly don't want to insinuate that there's a connection in any way to what I'm about to say, but the name is Alfred P. Murrah Building, Oklahoma City. What you're looking at behind you versus that image from the early 1990s. And the scene of families trying to locate loved ones who may be missing and unaccounted for in the rubble, 2001 September 11th. Both images in your mind, you take it from there. The bombing at the Murrah Building in April of 1994, that was a domestic terror event that comes with its own horrors because of that. This may even feel today to families a bit more sinister because there is no terrorism, there is no intent that's apparent at the moment, I should say, because it is still new. These are people who, like you, like me, like everybody listening to us on the air today, just doing what they do. Right.
And they were sleeping, and some night owls might have been awake. And the building that they had around them, their rock, their homes, their families grew up here, they were vacationing here, all of a sudden is gone. I will tell you, while we're comparing things, I actually covered the earthquake in Northridge, California. That was actually also in 1994. And that was, that earthquake leveled a building that was a very similar structural appearance here. It was a pancake, and it was the sort of sereneness of it and the stillness of it and just concrete and debris is so unsettling, because when you think of what is underneath that, I just can't, horrifying is the word that comes to mind. And so that's kind of what I've been thinking about, the families who just in an instant lost their whole lives in a moment that they could never expect. So that brings me back to all of these people talking about this building and their complaints about the building. And I think anybody who lives in a condominium kind of expects drama and complaints, and the homeowners association is sometimes at odds over things. But what we really have been hearing, so many of the families here coming up and saying, you know, my sister-in-law was hearing rumblings yesterday, and the roof work has been going on for a week. And there really have been, maybe in hindsight today, people who noticed things that might have been awry. You know, we do not know what happened or how it happened. It's a 40-year-old building. It is up for its recertification, which is a mandate every 40 years in South Florida. Buildings have to have a top-to-bottom inspection. Every little detail has to be recertified. There are copious reports. This morning when I was asking about it, no one knew if it had been done yet, but since I've been talking to some people who say they've been working on it. So it sounds like the 40-year recertification process of this building was ongoing. Renovations and roof repair were ongoing. It is on the beach. It is 40 years old. It is salt air and dampness. That is just not a good thing for any building, and that's why buildings on the beach have to really be cognizant of this. There was a 2015 lawsuit by one of the tenants that was settled about water coming in through cracks. All of these things may have nothing to do with it or everything to do with it, and that's going to be the thing that is studied and investigated as time goes by. Today, it's all about those families.
That's right.
And speaking of those families, Glenna, you humanize this, because when you see this, you see rubble, you see an explosion, you see a collapse, you don't know what to think. You may not know the people, those viewers watching may not know anybody there. But when you talked about Linda March and that being her penthouse and just who she was and that nobody has heard from her, it also brought me back to a little while ago. She mentioned we put their pictures and their names on the air. It was a family, Glenna, you talked about them with a little daughter, and it really choked you up, and I could see it and hear it in your voice. And when you do things like that, it becomes more than just a story about a building collapse. It's these people and their pictures and their faces and their names.
You know, that's kind of what it's all about. That's what we connect to. We connect to the human part of things. And I think social media today is filled with photographs of people who have not been heard from. The people you're working for, as I stand here, Andres, I can't remember the other gentleman's name, who were in apartment 803, who had just adopted this little girl named Sophia.
Yes.
Fabian, thank you. And they adopted Sophia not too long ago. They were staying here in a friend's apartment, and we met that friend. She's back from Argentina. I came upon her on the stoop of a sidewalk, utterly sobbing, uncontrollable, and I stopped to see if I could comfort her a bit and talk to her a bit, and she provided those photographs. And you know, my apologies for losing a little bit of composure earlier, but to me, as a parent and as a friend and as a mother, you look at this face of a little girl, you look at this happy family, a new family, you look at you look at Linda March, who's so happy to be back, you look at a young couple, young 20-something couple who are staying together here, whose parents are putting out on Facebook their photographs. She's a young student at Tulane, and I don't know, if he's going to school yet, but there's a beautiful photograph of the two of them on the beach, probably not so far from here, who they haven't heard from. Someone's kids, your kids, my kids. So that's, I think today, as everybody is, there's so many people here out on the beach. Many people really want their privacy. And I will tell you, I'm going to be very respectful to the people who do not want to be seen in their moment of grief and bewilderment. But there's so many out here. Many of them, we've met a lot of families who have multiple units in this building. So that's going to be something really difficult. A lot of them go to, there's a huge synagogue not too far from here, a couple of blocks down, an Orthodox synagogue. Many families go there, so we see them here. So this is going to be a really devastating moment for a lot of people in our community that are going to need our support, and certainly the information that we bring them in the next days and weeks and, could be months.
And
Nicole, Calvin.
And Glenna, from your reporting from years ago on the earthquake, and you can understand from Hatzel's report how the gentleman went from feeling anguish to anger, and he talked about being on the side that you're on, about how the rescue teams were not really actively working at this hour. Do you agree with what he saw, or are you seeing something differently?
I will tell you what I've seen firsthand at the moment right now, and I'm going to show it to you firsthand. At the moment, my visual from this point on the beach, I do not see a human being on the rubble at this point. I do hear sirens, I do hear announcements. Earlier today, from say 9 o'clock to probably noon, 1 o'clock, there were absolutely crews on top of that mound. There were dogs, so there was work going on. That is what I see. What I can surmise from this person who is just in utter grief and despair is that all he wants to see are people and machines digging. That's what he wants to see. The reality of a rescue operation is probably far different than what he is looking at. And, hope remains alive with people to the very end. That is human nature. But I think the realization for people, a couple of people that I've spoken to, as the hours go by, as they hear about the structure of a pancaked building, I think they are coming to grips with the fact that there is not going to be a lot of good news coming out of from what you see here. And that is the reality of what we know right now. But the work does continue. The work is absolutely not over.
The reality of a rescue and recovery mission. And Glenna, thank you for your real and smart and just very human reporting, and we'll be checking back in with you, of course, so stand by. exactly where you are.
And hope is the word. We're going to take a quick break, but we'll be back with more of our crews out there on the scene of this condo collapse in Surfside.